Hi there, this is Emily from the Accelerator team, and I wanted to share with you some of the framing and materials that we used when we shared about Achievement First Crescendo, which is the time period that happens in the weeks leading up to state testing for our scholars. This webinar will serve to give you information about the important framing that we think is in place in this time, not just the materials themselves, but also the messaging that we give to scholars. So I want to start by talking through our aims and agenda. We're going to give you a framing and overview of the messaging that we give to scholars and how we build culture before we talk about the available math and reading materials. In just a second, I'm going to take us to a link where Doug and Daisha write to the larger Achievement First family about this time of crescendo. I'm going to pause the video, have you pause the video here, and then go look at that letter on the link. And as you're reading that letter, I want you to answer the question, how would you characterize Achievement First's approach to preparing for the state test? Once you have that answer, I want you, that's one of the things that you're going to email me as a takeaway so that I can then open the resources from Achievement First to you. So pause the video, go read Doug and Daisha's letter, and then come back to us. As you may have noticed in Doug and Daisha's letter, it's really important at Achievement First that we understand how great our feedback can be with scholars, and that this is a time where we're helping scholars challenge themselves to be the very best that they can be. We show them love, we show them that we care about them, not just because of their data, but because the data paints a picture of what's possible for all of our scholars. It's so important that we get families invested in this time as well. You may have had other thoughts, and I'm excited to read them when you email them to me. We also come back in this framing time to the commander's intent. The commander's intent, as says here in the PowerPoint, really concisely explains what success is going to look like in an operation, whether that's a military operation or in our case, an important test-taking time of year operation. But it's going to include the purpose and the conditions of the end state, and also link the mission, the concept of operations, and tasks. So in just a minute, I'm going to show you Achievement First, Commander's Intent for Crescendo, this important time period. And when I do, once again, I'm going to have you pause the video and send me your answer to this question. How does Achievement First, Commander's Intent align with our prior characterization of crescendo, which you just saw in Doug and Daisha's letter? I'm going to have you read this to yourself because it's awkward for me to read out loud in a webinar setting. So once again, pause the video, read our commander's intent here, and then answer the question about how the commander's intent aligns with our other thoughts for crescendo, and email me those responses. The daily data cycle is so critical for our scholars because it helps them see exactly where they are and where they need to go. And through rapid feedback, they experience tons of growth during this time of year. Our small group interventions also help meet scholars where they are. And most importantly, a student culture of focus and investment, but also joy, is critically important. Scholars can potentially lose sight of what really matters here, and what matters is that they are experiencing joy in their growth that they're making at school. So there's a multi-pronged approach to crescendo at Achievement First. There are the things that we believe in at a system, and then of course there are the systems in place that a school uses to roll this out with teachers and make it happen. At a network level, we believe in these rapid data cycles, and you'll see through the shares for Math and ELA what that looks like. We also believe in a vibrant culture for scholars, and we'll share some strategies for that in a minute, and school-based in these small group interventions. Once you are released to the materials you will have access to, for example, the launch of Crescendo with Elementary Principles, that PowerPoint, and what those materials consist of. Vibrant culture is something that we really believe is important during this time. Some schools, for example, might pick certain themes, like after seeing the movie Hidden Figures, in a reinvestment in NASA and the brilliant minds behind some of the mathematics at NASA, they become our mentors who we're excited are mentoring us through the Crescendo process. So that was one school's choice. But through these people that we pick as our mentors, we're also re-embodying the values that are important to us: hard work, perseverance, etc. We build in time for celebrations and community engagement and affirming our scholars as they're working. Once again, vibrant culture is something we believe in as a network with these 6 staples, but there are individual materials that schools put together to make this manifest for scholars. And again, once you go through this PowerPoint, then we'll send you those materials as well. Academic investment also happens through these 3 key components: building stamina, having scholars check their work, and perseverance. There's a link to math habits and student goals that will help make that happen in mathematics, but these 3 things, stamina, checking your work, and perseverance, are happening in both math and ELA. So now we're going to get into some of the math-specific cycles. I'm going to pause here, have you pause here and just read through the graphics that you see here on the screen for a minute, and then unpause. Welcome back. Hopefully you've now had a time to look through the overarching cycles for mathematics. Achievement First has elementary school and middle school materials for math, for Park in grades 3-4, and then for SBAC in New York State exams in all the grades 3-8. You'll note that there's some variations on a theme here for what literally happens during the math block, but each block, for whether for elementary or for middle, whether for SBAC or for New York State exams, there's looking at student work and using that student work to drive what's happening in error reteach analysis. And then there's some more practice. Then you go back to looking at the student work and using that student work to come back to do some error reteach. There are also quizzes available. You'll note too that this takes up about 100 minutes of the day in total that the materials are having for middle school, and a little bit shorter, I think about 60 minutes for math. Once again, I'm going to have you pause and read through the graphic for mathematics here, and that focus in on how this looks a little bit similar or different for Connecticut SBAC versus New York, which was on the previous slide. Welcome back. Thanks for pausing and taking a look. You'll note what something interesting about Connecticut here is that we have what we call mini mocks, or short, almost cold practice exams that are happening, and that's leading to reteaching as well. Those materials will be made available to you upon the completion of this webinar. That was math, and that was quick. When you have questions about mathematics, reach out to Stephanie Lyon at achievementfirst.org. She'll be able to better explain to you the structures, the systems, and components of Math Crescendo. ELA is really similar to math. We're working to increase daily data cycles, and that is also going to happen when scholars are looking at new cold texts frequently. So they need to increase their at-bats with cold texts. Important to note here that we want to align Crescendo habits across subject areas, meaning the same stamina they're working on in mathematics, they're working on in English as well, and differentiate by state and exam. So in ELA, we have materials available for elementary school and for middle school, for reading and for writing, for New York, for Connecticut, which is SBAC, so for New York State tests, for SBAC, and for Park in grades 3 and 4, which is a lot of materials and a lot of moving pieces. And this is just to say we don't recommend that you do all of them under any stretch of the imagination. We want you to pick and choose what you can really gain traction on. Once again, please pause your video, take a look at these graphics, come back. Thanks for pausing. Similar to math, what we really like to see happening in ELA, again, is addressing the previous day's data, doing a little bit of lesson and reteach, and then having scholars do some more independent practice. Taking that practice, identifying trends, coming back to it. That's happening in reading, and it's also happening in writing, but in writing it also involves literally redoing some of that writing. There's 25 days of intense crescendo for elementary school in ELA. And there's about 15 days of crescendo in middle school ELA, though the structures, again, are similar. Scholars are practicing with a cold text in their literature block and doing an open response. Then they're redoing the open response with revision when they get to their composition or their writing class. Once a week, they're also going to do an extended response, actually have time to write out that extended response, and then they're going to revise their extended response the next day. There are recommended materials for you in reading through unit plans for these. There's also lesson plans for these, so you can engage more deeply in those materials. This is just to get you started on structure. So before we move on, this was a very, very brief overview of the structures, probably didn't even begin to do it justice. We did want to give a disclaimer. Stephanie Lyon and I are not the owners of the created materials or the posters of materials. So we very much hope that all of the materials that we've mentioned for math and ELA are available to you on the timeline that they're supposed to be available to you. And if that's not the case, we're sorry. And reach out to us, but just know that we are not the people creating these materials. So one last thing we are going to have you do is take a look at, for example, some of the links that will be made available to you upon the completion of this webinar. This exists for both math and ELA, and what it is basically a timeline of the materials that are going to be available and then where it is that you can go and find them. This is the ELA version of that spreadsheet, and there's a million tabs, which I know can be overwhelming, but it's because there's a tab for reading as well as a tab for writing, a tab for elementary school as well as middle school, and then New York at Park. This exists for both ELA and math. You'll note that a lot of materials are listed as CH, which means that they can be found in our curriculum hub, which is an open source curriculum hub, and we'll give you login information for that for how to attain those materials. If it starts with an I, that means that it's Illuminate, which is our test bank for quizzes. We can give you access to Illuminate through Illuminate itself if it's something you use in your network, and if not, those materials will be made available through PDF. The last thing that we're going to have you do before we release materials is have you watch what we call this hype video, which again is framing for our scholars and families about crescendo and why this time is so important for us. We're going to have you watch this video and then send your reflection to us about what Achievement First believes in for crescendo and why we think this time is so important. This red phone is to signify that this is the bat phone. Call Stephanie or me or send us an email if we can help you sort through any of these things. And then please, of course, go ahead and once you're released to the materials, if you see anything that you don't understand because this webinar didn't quite do justice to prepping you for it, just reach out and let us know. The last slide of this, which we'll send you when we release materials, has the links to all of the places where you can go and grab all of our wonderful crescendo materials. Thank you so much for listening. When you have questions, reach out. Once we get your responses about those 3 questions, the framing video, the commander's intent, and Doug and Dacia's letter, send us your responses and we'll release the rest of the materials to you. Thanks so much.